Welcome to the Outer Banks Podcast, presented by Seaside Vacations, with nearly 400 hassle-free Outer Banks vacation rentals. Begin planning your Outer Banks beach escape today at OuterBanksVacations.com. Here's your host, Chad Fournier.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Outer Banks Podcast. I am Chad Fournier with Seaside Vacations, and joining me today, Stuart Parks from the Outer Banks History Center once again, because this is the Halloween episode. So wanted to have Stuart in because last time we touched on a couple ghost stories on the Outer Banks, and you're kind of the man with the knowledge of all of it as far as people I know on the Outer Banks. So I wanted to pick your brain as far as Outer Banks ghost lore.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's one of the cool things about being an archivist and historian. Folklore and ghost stories fall within that realm, and I've always had a deep, avid interest in those things. So, of course, being a kind of a local historian, you get to dip your toes into it and kind of make it a speciality. So at this point, I'm at least knee-deep. And, I kind of pick up on things, and the more you learn about the classic stories, and then you learn the more familiar modern stories, and then you get to be privy to the private stories, the ones that don't make the books and don't make the typical circulation, but are good nonetheless. I got a few of those in the wings as well.
Awesome. Well, let's start very basic, and one that probably most people have heard of on the Outer Banks. Let's start with Blackbeard. And the whole Blackbeard thing. Let's start small and then we'll go deep. So
there you go. Well, yeah, Blackbeard. I mean, there's a lot going on with Blackbeard. I believe that it was the anniversary of his death was recently, and a coworker of mine just recently went to a symposium where they're bringing up the material from his ship and talking about the stuff they're pulling off of it. Now, his ghost stories they're kind of wide ranging. My favorite one, of course, is the one where after he was executed, his head was chopped off.
Right.
And
so that was after he was executed, or was he executed by his head being chopped off?
Well, if you could say it was his head being chopped off was the final blow. I mean, It took a lot to bring the man down. But execution wise, head chopped off, and it was tied to the bowsprit, the little thing pointing out the front, and you're supposed to be able to see it going down the sounds. This bright, glowing, flaming head on the front of the ship as it made its way back up to Norfolk. And but there's a lot of really interesting stories that go on about his death. My favorite one, because that's absolutely ridiculous, but a coworker of mine used to adamantly believe it, was that after his head was chopped off, his body got up, ran, jumped off the deck of the boat, and swam around it 3 times before it sank to the bottom.
That's the one I've heard.
Yeah, and that's it's very hard to believe. I mean, just all thing else aside, is like, how could the body see to turn left or right each one of those times? I mean, come on.
Because it's Blackbeard.
But even then. So, yeah.
I think the end of that I heard was that if you are on, and we should mention, Blackbeard made his home was Ocracoke, his home base of operations.
Oh, yeah,
so
right
that's why this is an Outer Banks ghost story. I think the end of that I heard was that you can see him walking up and down the beach some nights looking for his head, which also makes no sense.
No, yeah. I mean, you would see him as kind of squatting, feeling around in the sand for his head. And he's way off base because that thing went up to Virginia. They had to have proof that he was killed. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, but the flaming head of Blackbeard going up north, that's a good one. There's also supposedly his treasure is buried around here somewhere, and nobody knows exactly sure. So if you have a shovel and a lot of free time, go out there and start digging. They've said he buried it along shoreline, so that it's at least covered by water twice a day. And at that point, it's probably covered by water 24 hours a day. The shores have changed a bit. So if you got
a little bit since that time.
A bit.
But if you're down on vacation and you have a shovel, you had another thing to do on an Outer Banks vacation.
That's true.
All right, so Blackbeard, very basic. People know the legend of Blackbeard, and once again, like I said, he's based out of Ocracoke, and his whole death and all that, which we just went over. So what else do you have? Let's step a little deeper into the weeds.
Another famous one, and this one also is based on historical fact, is the portrait of Theodosia Burr.
Okay,
you're familiar with that one there?
I'm not.
Oh, that one's it's a good one. It's based around a true story, and the story is that Theodosia Burr was Aaron Burr's daughter. She was down in South Carolina and was going back up to Washington, D.C. to meet Aaron and give him a portrait that had been painted of herself. The ship left from South Carolina. It was out to sea. Nobody really knows what happened. An absolute mystery in that regard. A few days later, a couple in Nags Head, an elderly couple, they lived in a shack out by the ocean. This woman in white comes walking up to them carrying a portrait. She can't speak. They have no idea who she is. She's in total shock. But of course, back then, people were a lot more simple. This stranger's walking up the beach. She needed help. They brought her into the house. They fed her. They cleaned her, and she kind of stayed with them for a good number of years. Had no idea who she was. She never spoke. She was just there, and she had this portrait with her. So the years went on, and this woman fell sick. So they called for a doctor from Elizabeth City. He came all the way down to Nags Head, because back in those days you had to they did house calls. You didn't go to the doctor; they came to you. There's a big difference. He didn't know exactly what was wrong with her, but knew that she was not long for this world, and kind of gave the prognosis there. The family, the couple, didn't really have anything to pay him, but they had this portrait, and they knew the doctor collected art, so they're like, well, have this portrait of her. I mean, that's all we got that we can give. And as soon as he picked it up, the woman jumped off the bed and shrieked, "That's mine! I'm going to Washington, D.C. to give it to my father!" And she grabbed the painting and ran out of the cabin and ran out into the surf and was never seen again.
Whoa.
Next day, the portrait washed up on shore. And the doctor was still in town, so they gave it to the doctor, and he took it back to Elizabeth City. It was part of his private collection for years. His son inherited that collection and put some of it on display. And a distant member of the Burr family saw it and recognized her and contacted the rest of the family, and they came and they checked out the painting, and it was Theodosia Burr. And the painting now is in a museum in New York. It has a little placard beside it that gives a briefer account of the story than I have. So that is actually how the portrait came back to the family and back into being. And nobody really knows what happened to Theodosia. However, it is said that on some misty mornings in Nags Head out on the beach, you can see a young lady walking down the beach in a white gown. And if you approach her, she'll disappear. Now, I did a ghost tour a couple of years back, and that's one of the stories that we told.
Okay.
And I get to that part with the woman in the white walking down the beach, and there was these two guys in the back, and they turned pale. I was like, all right, what's up? Obviously, it's like you guys know something.
Right.
They were on the beach that morning, early morning, and it was very misty. And they said they saw a woman in white walk out of the fog towards them, and then she faded away.
That is creepy.
They believe that she was a victim of a pirate attack, and that she managed to escape or get away, or they set her aside.
Okay.
But the shock from the situation just completely blew her mind.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So that's Nags Head.
That's a Nags Head, yeah.
Should we move to another town?
Well, you can move up the beach to Kitty Hawk. I believe we talked about the Black Pelican last time, didn't we?
We did, but let's touch on it again.
Yes,
I actually could not remember T.L. Daniels' name last time, but I remember it this time.
I'm glad I tried to find it today. I couldn't find it. But yeah, T.L. Daniels. That's the one with the surf captain killed one of his surfmen for disrespecting his wife by spitting tobacco juice on her shoe or her dress or just in her general vicinity, and got it on her during while they were helping out with a shipwreck. And he demanded that the surfman apologize to his wife, and the surfman told him very rudely where he could put it. And so he was shot in the middle of the life-saving station. And of course, laws were different back then, so everybody's like, well, yeah, he was kind of rude, so he did kind of deserve it. And
that was back when there were life-saving stations up and down the beach, predating the Coast Guard, and they would just help people that got into trouble out in the sea.
Yep.
And the Black Pelican restaurant is actually used to be a legitimate old life-saving station.
It was that life-saving station indeed. Now, there's some people that say you can still see his blood on the floor over by the fireplace. I personally haven't seen it. I have spoken to people who have worked there over the years. They have incidents of wine bottles and glasses flying off the table in the general vicinity. People just getting a very nasty feeling of being watched around in that area. So he does haunt it to this day in that regard. And it's one of two haunted restaurants that I know about offhand. The other one is formerly the Firefly. I think is now the Eagles place down there.
Okay.
That one, it used to be a restaurant back in the 50s The downstairs was the restaurant. The upstairs was the family. The couple. That's where they lived.
Okay.
I can't remember what the name of it is, but it was so when they died off and it was sold. It became a restaurant upstairs and downstairs. When the renovation started, that's when all the trouble started. Once again, wine bottles flying, glasses flying off of the bar. Some bartenders have said that a black shadow would walk behind the bar and through them. It would be extremely cold. I've spoken to several people who have gotten locked in the bathroom.
Oh, no.
The ghost would actually lock them in there. And it was very, very unnerving.
That's something you hear a lot when there's renovation going on. There's
Yes.
paranormal activity. That's
Yeah.
like a common ghost hunter type deal if you ever watch any of those shows.
Oh, yes. The ghost at that individual location, which was the Firefly, when I first learned about it, they were doing massive renovation. The ghost came out and really ran a number on that place. I understand from somebody who actually knew the owners very well that they were advised to get out of the place. A medium drove all the way down here from New Jersey and found them.
Wow.
And told them to get out of that.
So the medium
restaurant.
found them? That wasn't something they reached out to the medium?
Said they found the medium came up to them at a party out here and said that you're so-and-so and so-and-so, you run the Firefly. And they said, yes, I do. And she's like, well, it's possessed. That place is haunted and it's evil and you need to get out right away. You're in danger. And they were actually, the business was kind of bad. And everything. Well, so they kind of closed it up the next day. And was like, well, with that kind of background, it's not doing that good. We might need to just close the whole place up. And then this random medium finds you at a party from New Jersey, drove all the way down here. It's like, yeah, it's possessed. You need to get out. It's time to go.
Plus, ain't nobody got time to get trapped in the bathroom.
No.
You don't
If you're
need
trying
that.
to run a place, you can't do it for the John.
You cannot.
No, there's no desk space.
Oh, man. I like that one. I like that one, too.
But the White Doe Inn also had a renovation going on, and they started seeing a lady would appear at the top of the stairs.
And that's a Manio.
That's a Manio. White Doe, it's a B&B in Manio. A lady would appear at the top of the stairs, and they thought it was the owner of the place, but they couldn't be sure. And they actually came by to try to do research where I worked to see if they could find any pictures. Of course, we didn't have any pictures of the family at that time. But they were fixing it up a bit. Ghosts started showing up, knocking on the walls, doors slamming, children giggling. The one disturbing one of that one was there was a very heavy door by the stairs, like a closet door, and they had taken the door off the hinges. And late one night, a lady was working there, and she heard her giggling, like children's giggling. But there was no children in the place. She was there by herself.
Right.
And so she went up to go around to try to find, where these kids were, and she heard that heavy door slam. And that's when she knew it was haunted, because they had removed that door and it was no longer there.
Did they take the door off because they were tired of hearing it slam there?
No, they took the door off because they were going to turn the underneath into a...
Oh, it was part of the renovation.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
No, I've been privy to a lot of ghost stories up at the north end of Roanoke Island, Lost Colony area. I did this show in 2014. And got to know a lot of cast, and of course, there's a lot of ghost stories that circulate with them. Of course, theater, there's always prone to ghost stories. There's a high energy level, but personally, I have witnessed what they call Shadow Man. He's a completely dark figure and appears in areas, and I've seen Gray Man as well. It's an individual in Civil War clothes.
Yeah,
and he's usually very downtrodden, and. I'm not the first. A lot of people have seen Gray Man over the years. He likes to appear mostly in the Grove. He has been seen up at the colony grounds themselves, but mostly in the Grove, the apartments where the actors stay. He likes to appear in hallways while you're sleeping. You'll wake up and you'll see him standing there. Or he likes to sit on the bed with you while you're sleeping. I've known one person who said that she would see him in the back seat of her car.
Oh, no.
Coming back from Colony at night. I stayed there one night, slept on the couch. We were doing some late night rehearsals for a PTW show. And I woke up, and it was like somebody had cranked stereo white noise up to maximum level. The whole room was shaking with it. And he was there in front of me, just in my face, just like fussing at me. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it was just like this constant noise. He was there, and I was very tired, and I took advantage of the situation and told him to leave me alone in very crude terms. Can't exactly repeat the words here. But as soon as I said it, he was gone. The noise stopped, he had disappeared, and the room was back to normal, and I went to sleep.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone to sleep at that point.
It's weird. It was weird because it wasn't elsewhere. It wasn't like a dream. I went to sleep on the couch, and then I woke up, woke awake, and he was there. But I could completely see the room. It was like I was normally asleep, but it was in that half-sleep phase. But it was extremely loud. And I've talked to a lot of people who've dealt with ghosts before and had those kind of incidents. And that noise, that large background kind of staticky noise is there with them. My wife saw a ghost in a house in Greenville that she was staying in, and she said it was like a train was going through the room.
That's interesting.
A loud roar, and there was a shadowy figure sitting across from her in a chair.
I've never heard of a noise coming like that with a ghost. It's really interesting.
Oh yeah. It's I have theories about it, but I want to get into that now. But it seems to come up a lot in those kind of situations. It's like tapping into a frequency or something like that.
Right. Well, you would think that the Lost Colony and the whole theater out there would have some weird stuff going on. With all the story of the Lost Colony itself, which is a creepy story.
Runs out there in the spring, mostly to bring in school groups or tourists. We tell the story of the Lost Colony while making it look like a ghost show. It's just a little thing we do. But aside from setting up the things for ghosts to appear, the little stories that we tell in between are actual accounts from cast and crew.
Oh, okay.
And there's a rather gruesome one from a friend of mine where he saw a young girl standing on a pathway in a white gown. And when she turned around, her throat was cut. As soon as she saw that, she disappeared. And I've heard from 2 other people who have seen her as well. One of them saw her up in a tree out on the Harriet Trail.
So that's all out there. All these stories are out there.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That seems like a high-activity place as far as the Outer Banks are concerned.
In general, is pretty potent. Mother Vineyard has hoodoos, which are like low, shadowy figures that run around. I've read them as travelers, traveling spirits, whatnot. But they tend to move in packs and groups. And I used to see some back in Greenville. Our house is kind of a transit point. They would just kind of little shadowy figures. We thought we had rodents at first, but then we realized we could see through them. And they're just like shadows that would come and just run through the room where we lived. And Mother Vineyard has them, and they will actually chase you. So they say that the only way to really steer clear of them is to run out on a pier because they can't go over water.
Gotcha.
And there's some old folklore that says that ghosts, like land-based ghosts, can't go over water. So that's the safest place you can be from them.
Huh. That's interesting.
All right.
Speaking of water, any more stories of ghosts that walk down the beach? I always think those are the creepiest.
Well, there's a gray man at Hatteras. He's well known, well talked about. He's different from the one at the North End, which I'll get back to the North End in a second. But he usually appears right before storms. There's a particular stretch of beach, then you'll see a man walking down the beach. He's kind of gray, and he's waving at you, and he's trying to get your attention. And if you get near him, he'll disappear. However, he usually appears right before very bad storms. And if you're lucky enough to see him, then your house will be spared. And that's how that goes.
So that's interesting, because I just heard a story about a gray man in South Carolina on the beach. He was going to see his love on the beach. He was returning back to the beach. He was going through a bog. His horse stopped moving. He had to get off the horse, and he was in quicksand. And his helper guy, his servant, what do they call those people? I forget. The ones that would like tool around with the people. But anyway, tried to save him, couldn't save him. His lady never did, see him come back, but she did, see the figure of the gray man, another gray man story. And there were like 3 different instances of the gray man story where he would kind of warn people of storms coming or, bad things that were going to happen. And then the big hurricane that happened back in whatever year this was, hit South Carolina, and the girl who he was going to see, her house was totally spared. So that's interesting, because it's kind of like what we talked about with the Goatman. So it seems like the gray man is, I just kicked my mic away. Seems like the gray man is
terror.
Yes. I was so frightened. Is all over the place. It's kind of a story that goes from state to state.
And there are those. There's ghost tales, ghost stories that are told, and what people don't realize is that they're actually part of folklore, and that they will ingrain themselves in a society to be useful. Another good one about this area is the story of the Witch of Nags Head Woods, which it's the same place where you see Goatman, and has been blamed for Goatman in some instances. But I've actually found accounts of this tale in Germany when I was doing werewolf research back in college, because when you're in college, you can research things like werewolves.
Yeah.
Just like spend your time
I'm going to
doing
research werewolves.
Yeah, and write a whole paper on it, and it's great. You feel good about yourself, and then you get out in the real world and find out that it's useless. But you get to carry this information with you. And the Witch of Nags Head Woods was, there was a miller who lived out in the woods in Nags Head, old Nags Head. And he's lived by himself, and everybody's all right with that, as they would be. And one day he finds this woman just comes up to his door, and she's bedraggled, and she doesn't have anywhere to go, anywhere to stay. He lets her in, lets her stay there, feeds her, takes care of her, and pretty soon, they kind of hook up, as you do in these situations, and he's very happy. The villagers were very upset because she wasn't a local. They didn't know where she came from. She just kind of appeared. They thought she was up to no good. So they were trying to warn him to get rid of her, that she was probably a witch. And he wasn't listening to none of it. He was having himself a good old time. And he went out in the woods one day to chop some wood, as you do, and was attacked by a big, vicious black cat. And in so doing, getting the cat away from him, he hit it with the axe and chopped off its paw. And he put it in his little pouch to show his buddy, his girl, when he got home, And gets in there, and she's in the bed. She's feeling terrible. And he's like, "Oh, I was attacked out in the woods, yada yada yada." And she's like, "Oh, that's terrible. That's horrible." And it's like, "Well, just I kept the cat's paw to show you." He's like, "Oh, no, that's all right. Just throw it away. I don't need to see it." So he reaches in his little pouch and pulls out a human hand, and that's when he kind of puts two and two together. He pulls the blankets back and see that she has a freshly chopped off stump.
Whoa!
And she turns into the cat and jumps out the window. And that's the last anybody ever saw of her. That same story, almost exactly, happened in Germany around the same time as werewolf stories were really kicking in, which is about the same time the witch hunts were going on. Everybody was kind of paranoid at that
right
point. But almost exactly the same story.
It's so interesting the way it spreads like that.
Oh yeah,
just like the urban legend stories. The one about every state has the story about the haunted house that is the scariest haunted house ever. You can go into it. You have to sign an insurance waiver. They touch you. They throw you up against the wall. There's real live snakes in there. And if you make it all the way through, you get your money back. But I've heard that story. I can't tell you every Halloween, whenever I start talking about haunted houses with people, that story inevitably comes up in every state that I've lived in.
Yeah. I think I saw some advertisements for one on Facebook. I was like, I don't want to do that, even if I do get my money back.
Yeah, it's not really worth your money back.
I don't want you touching me. That's the scary part. I don't know who you are.
Nags Head Woods, speaking of, is just a creepy place. How many cemeteries are back there?
I have no idea. There's a lot.
Yeah.
I've been to at least 2. And Lord knows how many are back there that's really just not documented. That's the good thing about this area. There's a lot of just cemeteries lurking here or there. I helped to find one in Collington. But yeah, they're just kind of abandoned and left to go.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's nice out back there, like to hike during the day and stuff. But at nighttime, as far as we were talking during the last podcast, we talked together about the kind of satanic cult scare they had back there back in the day.
Oh yeah,
in the Nags Head Wood area. What year was that?
Oh Lord, I can't be exactly sure of a year. It was the whole satanic panic pretty much happened in the mid to late 80s.
Okay,
that's when the people were afraid there was Satan worshipers out in the woods. I remember personally hearing about it down in New Bern, and they would show pentagrams spray painted on trees, or 666, or worship stand because somebody had misspelled Satan, and which happens a lot. Evidently Satanists have very bad grammar. And honestly, it was probably just a bunch of kids farting around the woods after like some real pagans were out there just doing their thing and minding their own business. And probably was the case in Nags Head Woods. You had some Wiccans out there who were just just trying to find a quiet place to do their stuff, and some kids came across it and made a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
But that was primarily mid to late 1980s. And when I did my Goatman research, that's when about the same time that people started talking about him as well.
We've mentioned Goatman twice. We went over it last podcast, but we haven't this one. So let's go ahead and tell the story of the Outer Banks Goatman.
Well, Outer Banks Goatman is different from a lot of other goatmen in that, I guess he's not that different, but he's primarily a guy in a raincoat, and that's about half of them are about guy in raincoat. The story is that he was a lonely individual who lived out in Nags Head Woods, who raised goats, and was kind of cut off from society. And one day some teenagers go back in there to antagonize Goatman, and he wasn't home. So instead of antagonizing, they killed his goats, as teenagers want to do. They're very voracious goat killers, those teenagers. So in revenge, Goatman has sworn to kill anybody who goes into Nags Head Woods and who messes with his goats again. And he haunts the woods in a raincoat, and he carries an axe. And if you see him, it's already too late. And he will chase you. He's not above running after you, and will throw that axe at you. I've heard that even if you're out of Nags Head Woods and you talk about Goatman too much, he will come get you that.
Oh, yes. Man, why didn't you mention that ahead of time?
Oh, that's because I'm spreading the love, man. Yeah, I work for the Goatman. People can't really determine if he is completely human or if he has the head of a goat through some kind of his parents or his father's love relationship with a goat. It gets kind of touchy. Or if it's the severed head of one of his favorite goat that he wears when he stalks his victims. But there is a yellow house deep in Nags Head Woods that has a light on. The word is, of course, that if you get there and the light is on, you see the light is on, it's already too late. He knows where you are. That's actually a park service house, and they keep equipment in it. But it makes for a good story anyway. Goatman's story started up around the 1990s, as we said. There was a lot of satanic ritual in the woods things going on. Goatman has actually traveled here from other states. Almost the exact same Goatman story comes from Maryland. And that Goatman, they can't decide if it's a guy in a raincoat with a goat's head, wearing a goat's head, or if it's an actual goat man who sold his soul to Satan to look like a goat. I think I would have higher ambitions if I was going to sell my soul.
Yeah, you might not want to pick goat.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get good pants for that kind of action. But
yeah, it's interesting, like we said, though. I mean, talking gray man, goat man, shadow people. I mean, it just goes from state to state, country to country. I mean, you mentioned the Germany thing.
Oh yeah.
It's very interesting that a lot of these stories you hear are replicated elsewhere. So yeah, I find that. I think it's a common thing. It's kind of cool.
There's also the popular one of the Cora tree down at Hatteras. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not.
Oh man, this is the one that comes to me a lot because people want to know more about it. And honestly, there's the Charles Woodby story, and Charles Woodby likes to blow stories out of proportion. And if he can't find the facts, then he makes them up. So it is Woodby, but the Cora tree actually exists. It's a tree down at Hatteras. It's this huge oak, and Cora is actually like carved deep into it. The explanation is that back during, once again, the witch hunting times, there was a lonely woman living in Hatteras around Buxton by herself. She had not by herself. She had a kid, but she was not married, so scandal. And people just kind of left her alone. They were very easygoing island folk at the time. They just went about their days. Some people suspected she might be a witch because whenever she would come to town, funky things would happen. A cow would get sick. Somebody pointed and laughed at her kid, and then that kid fell with a very bad fever. He almost died, that kind of thing. But for the most part, I mean, she didn't really cause any damage, so they kind of left her alone, Story goes that one night a particular ship got run ashore. Captain Eli Blood was on it. And he was from Salem, and he felt a divine call to persecute, hunt witches. So he considered himself a white witch and knew good magic. And of course, the ship was wrecked. They were stuck here for weeks because at the time you had to send communication through mail. It took a long time to get any response back, so they were hanging around Hatteras, and he kind of got bored. And somebody brought up the fact that Cora might be a witch, so he felt that maybe he should do something about this. On a particular night, somebody had found a dead body on the beach. 666 was carved into his forehead, so as they say. And Captain Blood felt it was time to persecute Cora, to bring her to trial. They bound her up and threw her out in the Sound. And, of course, anybody knows the Sound is not that deep. So when she didn't sink, they decided that she was a witch. There was a battery of other tests that they put her through, one of which involved her taking blood from her and all of her victims and putting it into a basin of water. And if you look into it, you could see the devil over your shoulder. That's a bit far-fetched. But anyway, bottom line, of course, once you're accused of being a witch at that time period, there's really no way out of it. You're going to be a witch. So they tied her to that large oak tree and put kindling all around it and was ready to set fire to her. And she's up there holding her baby. And Captain from Hatteras tried to step forward and stop everything. Like, this is getting out of hand. We don't really have any proof that she did that. We have courts for this kind of thing. And about that time, according to Whitby, the baby in her hands turned into a giant cat. Cat theme, huh? And screeched at everybody and jumped away and ran off into the woods, never to be seen again. A huge bolt of lightning came from out of nowhere and struck the tree, and everybody dove for cover. And when they got up, Cora was gone. There was a huge scar from where the lightning had hit the tree, and her name was carved into it, Cora, and it's still there to this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's trippy. And where exactly can you find that tree?
It's down in Hatteras. I've actually seen pictures of it. You can look up the Cora tree online.
Okay.
And it's hard. It's near a housing community, but there's roads going on either side of it, and they've actually built a little island in between the roads so the tree can still be there.
Interesting.
But yeah, I went online and searched for it. So it exists.
Road trip.
Mm-hmm. Or if you don't have the gas, you can just look it up online. But it's much better to go down to Hatteras.
Exactly. Well, it's always a good time to
the
go
tourist
to
dollars.
Yeah, another excuse to go to Hatteras.
Oh, yeah.
That's all you need. You just need a reason. Any reason. It's always a good time. Well, anything else?
Oh, shoot. Anything else? Oh, man. Roanoke Island Inn is haunted by a former postmaster who was postmaster for many years. And back in those days, you elected your postmasters. After he failed to secure election because of local politics and somebody wanted one of their friends in there, he out of embarrassment, he went into his bedroom and never stepped out of it again alive. That's where he stayed until he died. He had his food brought up to him. But evidently, people who stay in that room, their jewelry gets moved around, tossed around, things get lost. It's kind of a small story, but I personally have... First time I ever went to the First Colony Inn. It's one of the oldest inns out on the beach down there. And I remember that radio frequency noise I was telling you about?
Yeah.
I went in the off season. We were dropping off some brochures. And I walked into the main lobby room right where you first, when you first walk in, there's a little vestibule and then there's a huge sitting area. And it was that staticky kind of background noise. And as soon as I walked in, it was like everybody in the room turned to stare at me. But there was nobody in the room. So I just kind of backed up, and there was a receptionist at the desk, and I was like, this place haunted? She's like, oh, yeah. I was like, okay. I dropped off the brochures and left. That was a tasty.
Here's your brochures. I'm going to hang out in Nags Head Woods.
Yeah. And there's another one. Now, this is one I cannot divulge the information of where it is, but somebody came to do research about this place and to try to see what they could do about it or anything that they could figure out about it. But there's a house, once again, in Nags Head Woods that has a room in it. And that room has to be kept closed at all times. If you were to open that room, there is the ghost of a little girl that comes to you in your dreams, and she does very horrible things to you. So the only way to get her to go away is to buy her a new toy and put it back in that room and close the door. So she came to do research on the house. Of course, we couldn't find anything. I've had previous experience with something similar. And she asked my advice on the situation, which was, of course, leave that room alone.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone. But yeah, that's one of the ones that doesn't make the normal rounds. It's one of the creepier ones. It's like, oh yeah, you got your ghosts walking down the beach and it makes for a good scenic thing.
Yeah.
But then you got those situations where somebody's living with something that they cannot comprehend. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, you guys, yeah, that sounds creepy. But these stories also prop up here and there.
And it just adds to the creepiness factor of Nags Head Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably a lot of people are scared to go back there at night.
There's some more reasons to do
A
that.
lot of people.
And I, doing my radio show stories, I just keep coming up with these things, man. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Doing radio show stories, I was doing research. I believe it was 1996. A couple was staying in a house in Nags Head, not old Nags Head, not the woods, but in Nags Head. And the kids woke up the next morning and there was sand all over their sheets, all between their sheets, but under the bed sheets, just all over the bed, just wet, stinky sand. Smelled like old salt water and rot. It was all over the floor. And the family thought that somebody had gotten in the house in the middle of the night and just kind of tromped it around. So the next night, they made sure to lock all the doors. And it happened again. There was sand all in the kids' beds, all over the floor. They noticed wet footprints, small footprints on the floor around the kids' beds. So the next night, they went out to go eat. When they came back, all the pictures had been turned around sideways, this and that and the other, throughout the entire house. It smelled like old, rotten seaweed. It just stank. It was very salty. There was sand everywhere. So they contacted the landlord, or the person who rented the house to them, and they were like, yeah, whatever, you're just trying to get out of your, paying for the week. And they're like, no, we're totally fine with it. We're not asking for our money back. We're just letting you know these things are happening in your house. It's like, oh, you're just trying to get out of paying the money. You just want your money back. Like, no, we don't really. It's interesting. It's kind of creepy. But we want you to know that this is going on.
Yeah.
So they went to the downstairs people, because this is upstairs. They went to downstairs people to see if they had experienced anything. And the downstairs people were quite cross with them because they complained that the entire time the family had been there, they'd been moving furniture around and banging stuff on the walls. And of course, they hadn't been.
Right.
So whenever they're out of the house, this is what was going on. That night, they go to bed. And the kids wake up screaming in the middle of the night. And the husband and wife run in there. One of the girls felt somebody sit down on her bed with her. The bed was soaking wet, stinky, wet sand everywhere. They, to this day, have no idea what happened. They stayed there their entire week. They kept getting these instances. They actually called a reporter from the Coastland Times who went over there and interviewed them. And it's like the reporter herself said, it stinks. It's like she wrote in there, it smelled like rotten sand. There was sand everywhere. And that's about the most that came out of it.
That is a good one. Wow. I'd like to find that Coastland Times article.
I can find it for you. I can take it up.
Yeah, and read that. That's some creepy stuff right there.
It made first page of the news. Now, if it was just a creepy story, they were throwing it in there to psych people up for, like, say, Halloween.
Right.
Yeah, I could see that, but it was in September.
Gotcha.
So it was a bit far off.
Stuart Parks, sir, I appreciate you coming in to share your ghost story knowledge with us. I will put the Outer Banks History Center website link in the show notes if you want to check that out. Anything you want to plug coming up? You do a lot of different stuff. I know you just got doing Rocky Horror Picture Show for Halloween at the Theater of Dare. Any other ventures that you want to let people know about?
Not quite. When with a local group, we're doing short films. They just premiered last week at the film festival, Halloween Film Festival that the Mad Art puts on. So yeah, if you want to go check out one of our horror films and you have a strong stomach, Boy is out for rent on Amazon. It's BOY exclamation point. There's another one out there about a ventriloquist doll. That's not us. Ours is a lot of me screaming. So there's that.
Well, that's something maybe not a lot of people know about the Outer Banks. We love Halloween down here. I mean, you have the Horror Film Festival, you have the Halloween Parade, Rocky Horror Picture Show, like you said. I mean, there's just something going on all the time Halloween-wise. So it's a real good time if you ever want to come down and visit for Halloween, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of spooky ghost stories and folklore to go along with it. So
yeah.
It's kind of remote. We got to find a way to entertain ourselves.
If you do want to come down and visit, we can connect you to the Outer Banks via OuterBanksVacations.com. Get you an amazing Outer Banks beach rental to come stay in for a week. Stuart Parks, sir, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Happy Halloween.